Julie here with Sirius Dallas Moon Jupiter Hour. Welcome to Uranus in Gemini. Moon squaring Uranus in Gemini from Regulus. Uranus said now Venus. The first thing I saw was upon the ingress was the reclaiming of the heart in unexpected places. And this is where this Moon Ketu Maga squaring Uranus in Gemini, the way that we see women, and it is actually quite surprising to me. I mean, I knew Venus is ingressing before Uranus, and then Uranus is going to catch up. I did not expect it to be so woman-related, where the reclaiming of the heart has to do with honoring the feminine and dematerializing the mold. It can be the mold in the palaces, the mold in our teeth, the mold in our toenails and skin and so on. But it has to do with honoring the feminine. And when you think about the moldy structure or moldy palace, it doesn't look pretty. And it doesn't look pretty because the habits and the habitat and the ability to maintain a free of mold place, a cleanly place, had to do with touch. The sacrifice of the infants is challenging that. Now, here's the thing. Maga, Leo, Regulus are to do with the heart. Even kingship monarchies, fathers, the heart that has to eat an infant. I saw a picture of an infant where the belly was cut, like almost like bread loaf, and yeah, and basically participating in any such meal, and it can be metaphorical or literal, is creating mold structures that permeate the heart. If you think about the walls of the palace or the walls of the houses, and right before the ingress, I was seeing the use of borax to. I'm not joking. And the thing about borax is that they can use internally and also externally. And this is also to do with the fungal infections. So the ability to see, the ability to connect with the heart in a healthy way, in a touch that is healthy, does not contain these practices that create mold in the palace, but also mold in the teeth of the common people. I have my lot of union in Magha Nakshatra, with Aries crossing through the ruler of my 7th and 4th. And I can think about how the many coping mechanisms that were assigned to, not if I was seen as a woman, then I would be a sacrifice, or I would be subjected to corruption, which is basically a form of rape and torture, or corruption by the connection to the innocence had to go through dissociation, because we had the infant that is a bread loaf, and the woman that is sacrificed, and everything, all of these practices create mold, but also they take away from the royalty. They take away from anything regal. And this is where dematerializing the mold and these practices, rather than the heart is making way for a healthy leadership. Because even in the most decentralized regime, leadership is a part of. And a part of this process of the detoxification and the retrieval of the heart, the rape and the violation, astral and not, that was seen as a way to mind control. Root chakra, third eye chakra. Second chakra, expression chakra. And root, of course, crown. And this was way to basically corrupt the crown. The healthy crown or the healthy heart is not moldy in the sense that it doesn't rape, is not raped, and then it aligns. I know that from within the orders, there would be Rudolf Steiner that would talk about the Ahrimanic, which is kind of like the artificial technologies, and the Luciferian, which is supposed to be the lower chakras, but if the lower chakras are raped, then it's a problem also with higher chakras, and then we have corruption of what the organic chakra system, and the conjoining of the lower chakras and the higher chakras, they're meeting at the juncture of the heart, and when that is molded, and it can be molded through the rape that disconnects from the crown, and this is the ritual abuse. Now, the fact that the Regulian hereditary traditions were permeating with that. Even if we think about the infants that are basically raped and tortured to loss of sense of self and the so-called transcendence incarnation thinking, this is something that permeates and creates the mold in the Magha. And wherever it stems from, when this preceded, let's say, Standard Oil. People are like, you're talking about the 9 millennia. I was like, well, Uranus would send us squared Regulus, yes. But Aries, Andromeda, is applying to trine Regulus, which means we have conjoining with Sedna once in a millennia, once in 12 millennia, chance to shift the mindset regarding the practices of the elite. And this is where the reconnection with the heart can be connecting to the natural roots without those transmuting the energies of the rituals of 9 millennia and connecting to the heart. And so the what people call the crown chakra or the upper chakras, or the connection with the all that is, can be retrieved to the Regulian phase, but also to the entire Earth or cosmos. And with that process of demolding is also dissolving the rapey structures, and this is the actual and authentic connection to the heart. For many people that were the victims of the people in the Epstein list, and the people in the Epstein list. This is very important. Um, the trust that the heart requires, the vulnerability, the openness, um, the courage. And the awareness that, just like, I don't know, let's say white people um, look at issues that BIPOC people are dealing with and they need to transmute um, a lot of prejudice that essentially is not about, how should I say that? It's not about the image, but about the authentic connection with one's own heart, transcending the projection on the visible. Then, at the same thing we have with the feminine, which is one of the core of the hearts of the issue. Now, I know that with the gender changes that were sometimes non-volitional, sometimes there are way more women there, and it's and it is this Uranus Sedna crisis with Regulus it is remediated here by Aries, because Aries shifts the thinking regarding the elite also within the elite. If you think about the scientists, if you think about Einstein, if you think about Copernicus, they were considered within the elite. And by the way, Aries is associated of elite people communicating with common people. There are many things that Aries is associated with. People are not, they hear only the LGBTQ or the exiled or the uninvited, but there are many things to do with Aries. And this is where we have once in 5.5 centuries chance to transmute and shift completely the thinking regarding anything MAGA, religion, monarchy, the MK Monarch projects, the rituals that were so taboo, and the understanding that at the heart of the matter, if we think about transcending death and even reincarnation, when the heart is not moldy, when the rituals that are done are not corrupting the timelines or corrupting the grid or corrupting the heart, then the natural cycle of incarnation becomes the gate for the life and death, is no longer torturous. And people don't have to be worried about the game being rigged in their favor. Um, and here again, I'm afraid to mention names. Um, and because when the corrupting of the heart practices are not practiced, essentially it means that child and human sacrifice is not practiced. Um, feminization as degradation rituals is not practiced. The soul can transition from the carpel naturally and reincarnate naturally and evolve, because mold is stagnation. Without the fear that it will have to reincarnate as that infant, or it basically means that the points of incarnation per every individual are not corrupt. And that means something that may look like utopia, but to some people, me broadcasting about this topic from a cell phone upon the ingress of Uranus, as a person whose astrology practice is not only not used to do rituals, but to use to curate and transmute and negate the corruption of the heart. That would have been unprecedented. For quite millennia even. And because Uranus is conjoining Sedna, and Venus is 2 meters from that conjunction, now anything going through Magha has this Me Too quality. Why? Because we are retrieving the honoring of the feminine. Just in the timelines where there were persecution of the women, just in the timelines where there were the burning of the witches, just in the timelines where there was the guillotine on the monarchy, just in the time where the Epstein list is exposed. Chiron Aries here, trying in this Maga point, and Uranus Sedna are at the crisis point. But it's not a crisis, it's a crisis that confronts with a certain need to change. It's a sudden upheaval. Oh, the heart is retrieved, then the natural emotions and the vulnerability, and then the attempts to corrupt that flow, and the necessity there is to learn something, to learn eroticism that aligns with an open heart. And uncorrupt here, no, it doesn't mean virginal as much as it means willingly consensual and ready, rather than raped and so on. And this is where the incarnation, or the incarnation into the body and out of the body, is natural and without torture and pain that corrupt the timelines. So, and that removes the fear from union. uh, and this is also the notion of when people no longer need to sacrifice a child and then completely torture another child for the process of reincarnation, then then, um, then what we have is that the expandable children and the a lot of the facets of ritual abuse, actually, if not all, are no longer needed, and the regal is not weaker, but actually more embodied and more present with the sun in Taurus. Here, the word embodied. When the heart is embodied, And this is where this view extends to every single individual. So this is cross classes, cross bloodlines, cross origins. Because the sun exalts in Aries, and Aries' origin is the head of the baby. So per every head of the baby, per every head of every baby. It's very remote, it's very far from where Maga has been. But this is the origin of Maga. This is the origin of the Regal. I don't know what millennia to extend it to, and the fact that people think in royalties and crowns is only a couple of millennia. Like anything said now receives the 12th millennia cycle. So what I say can extend to the cosmos, and it can extend to the earth. But Uranus Sedna calls it to extend to the earth. Uranus Sedna is simply saying, okay, the mold is being removed from the palace. The mold has been removed from the teeth. It's a fact. And it can be overwhelming, but it also, together with that overwhelm, the heart is being re-embodied. And Sun is indeed going from the square to the trine with Pluto. Along Beta Persei will be aligning to the trine. And it's also whether it's the mold at I don't know, the infrastructure, or the city of the commoners, or the mold in the palace, or the mold in our teeth. That mold is going to be over and done with, and what is left is the heart. Now, the process, the duration that it took to remove that mold, it goes together with the rapey and sacrificial practices of 9 millennia in lineages. The teeth of the children will no longer rot because the parents ate unripe fruits. Okay, even the Bible that doesn't even have will and consent in it is correct twice a day. It's kind of like, think about this sentence as finding one correct thing in the Bible. That is very recent. Okay, it is. Now, here's the thing: in those corrupted rituals, there is Eve, and then there is Lilith. And there is the book of Enoch, and so on and so forth. The exile of Lilith from heaven, because she would not be subjugated, created servitudes. Isis and Osiris. Servitudes are not needed. Slavery is not needed for the, and this was also the Egyptian gnosis. Okay, they were building the pyramids all the way to, but kind of like the Burj Khalifa of the both were built with slaves. Both were reach in the sky. And both graves too many people in them anyway. And what is if you think about Burj Khalifa, the entrance of Friday is different. It's 2 minutes difference in the top and in the lower part of the building. The point about the pyramids was also to transcend time and receive gnosis from that time. The gnosis was the sixth sign, aligning the feminine and masculine. And that was considered elite gnosis because they were thinking in pyramidal schemes then. Now I have Moon Sirius, so I'm very connected with the fact that this gnosis is for the people, and for good kingdom that is the bigger sun. If we think about Regulus as the Regalian hereditary traditions, Sirius is the bigger sun, and this means it sees what the regal. It comes before the regal. We need to embody the Sirius gnosis before we transmute in the Sirius gnosis. Also gives us the idea of what to transmute. If I think about the rising of Sirius, when I was watching the reindeers, right before the Epstein dossiers year, then I was watching the reindeers. I was escaping, but the place that I had to escape because of those rapey things that probably have to do with Regalian lineages. And um, and then I was watching a reindeer crosses the road in Finland, and I asked myself, well, when people ask what that they can get away with this, can get away with that, and these are like horrible atrocities. Now I'm watching this reindeer cross the road, and car stops to allow the reindeer to cross the road. I'm like, can I get away with that? Sirius is the gnosis. It was around the Sirius rising. Is the gnosis. I don't know if that was around the Sirius, but definitely the can I get away with that, meaning somebody that's way more benevolent. Oh, the reindeer showing me that that their food was the antlers were like the bushes and the food that they were eating from, and how the land was fertile, and um, and this is where the serious gnosis is very simple. Is aligning feminine masculine, honoring the feminine, honoring the masculine. Simple. If we honor feminine, honor masculine, there's no slavery. It also means that slavery is a disease. And right after the building of the pyramids, Egypt had to release the slaves. It took time. It was one after another, after another, after another, but it was forced to release the slaves. And upon the release of the slaves, the story of the slaves is they had to abolish child sacrifice, abolish the rituals to do with mammon, or the golden. Um, and it's unclear where did that slaves learn that, maybe from the residents of the region of the equator, and they had to kind of like believe in the promised land. And upon escaping slavery, they would have food, and they would have, but they would find it difficult, or say missing the pots of meat, where they were basically enslaved. And so this shifting of the timeline, both from the Egyptians' point of view, which means they had to consciously remove the residues of the mold of the palace that were that were formed by slavery and by the misalignment and the mishonoring of the feminine. and the slaves that basically had to digest that gnosis as well. The monotheistic Bible was not exactly um, if in the Ten Commandments would be to not rape, and the beginning of the 10 in 2, where do these practices stem from? But the most that we had was the teeth of the children will no longer rot because the parents ate unripe fruit, which means the parents were molesting children. And it means child marriage. And this is basically honoring of the feminine, that we have traces even within the most corrupt of books, which is the Bible. um, yeah. Anybody that complains about Islam, they came after after Judaism and Christianity. That's from the foundation. That being said, monotheism origined in the wish to abolish child sacrifice. Abraham going to Abraham, people take a look at the genital mutilation, but that was the compromise respective to the common traditions back then, which was to not mutilate and sacrifice a child. And I was actually informed by this by someone who looked into the history of a religion, um, and but the Jews would probably disagree with that interpretation, where the carpal mutilation is actually antithetical to monotheism. Um, and a lot of I was told that a lot of rabbinical streams agree with that, but they're afraid that the people will just not follow God without this carpal even mutilation even today. Uh, Whatever they're doing, I don't know. But it also tells us that ritual abuse preceded monotheism and is unnecessary for enlightenment. In fact, honoring the feminine and the embodiment is in itself that enlightenment. And this is the square with the regal when we think about, let's say, having gone through, let's say, torture or something like that as initiation. Well, in fact, what it creates when it comes to these particular rights is corruption of the timelines that that causes a downfall of the monarchy. It causes of anything regal, anything Regalian. um, yeah, these are my thoughts upon the ingress, Jupiter hour, Mercury Aries. Um, and this is where also the heart can trust and connect Because, for example, even if people fear, let's say, the treason that comes with the Slava boy method, the sex espionage, those people are trained by rape and torture to loss of sense of self and mind control. So when there's no, when those practices don't exist, then the issues of trust in relations, including love, um, are no longer. And when the heart is not corrupt, then the ego issues that make it difficult to have happy, safe, sane human relations are no longer, and that means that instead of blaming it on the self-respect of the traffic tortured individual, people can see into the heart of the matter and be able to see one another. And from that stems the leadership. There's also individual leadership, because it's very difficult to lead unsovereign people. And if I think about the sun exalts in Aries. Aries is the I am. Each and every individual having a sense of self-trust, the I am, is essential to leadership. This is and this is also the time where we can materialize the wisdom of Magha, as we dematerialize a lot of the moldy stuff, which is the Epstein dossiers. But the point is to dematerialize the practices. Uranus Sedna creates this crisis that, um, how should I say that? Um, it's a crisis that shakes up. If you think about, the difference between removing black mold by calling somebody who understands about it, then the grandmother removing black mold by a solution of borax or lime wash, and the difference being is that, think about, I don't know, Amish people coming to the royal palace and say, this place not been lime washed. That's Uranus square. Because Mercury is the technicalities, is the simple thing, it's the thing that every child knows, but which child? and then and then it's kind of like, think about, oh, um, grandma that is going through a Uranus opposition visits the royal palace, and she says, what's that thing? Let me get, where is my borax? um, these people don't clean here. It's a crisis. Um, you think about, it's kind of like the time where I would try to, broadcast and so on and so forth. Then my mom comes in, it's like, where's the fork? I'm like, I'm broadcasting. No, 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 no. Where's uh, and And this is how I would describe the Uranus-Gemini, the Uranus-Gemini interruption to this Ketu Maga thing. Now, this interruption is a crisis point, but it's also a point where, oh, the heart is reacts suddenly. And Aries here assists to shift the thinking. Aries is actually a little bit of a point of talus. So you want to think about Discordia as a point of talus between Regulus and then a Balgadi. Oh, there's Trojan War! Think about, I don't know, think about the time of the Second World War. Some girls were supposed to be wed to, I don't know, rabbinical and so on, and then it was like, oh, oops, it's Holocaust. They could have not have, slavery, rape, ritual abuse, genitalia mutilation as pact with God. I remember when I was listening to no, people are talking about the ritual abuse of it in the rabbinical institutions in Israel. I remember when I was listening to Gigi Young, and she was talking about the Luciferian, the Arimanean, the confusion of Venus and Mercury. And me, what do I know about this thing? I heard a lecture. Then I come to share it with a friend that had a Jewish, and he was very secular, but he heard this. He exploded on me, and I have no idea what he wants. But here's the drama. Women trying to, I don't know, counter ritual abuse, and then they like quote the Bible. There's all the sex in the Bible is rape. The woman that would not be subjugated to Adam is the cornerstone of anything dealing with ritual abuse, which is it is Jupiter hour. Like I said, the Huguenots women did not insist on changing the scriptures to honor women, to honor the feminine. And they were like, oh, this is the book, it's a book out there, and they were living their lives. And then there was an entire Huguenot massacre, which was a religious inquisition. So these arguments about the scriptures matter. It is even a form of Sedna reverence in this hour because Sedna in Gemini is words, and Moon Magha is Moon associated also with Sedna. The words that the ritual abuse goes by. the incantations as they rape the infants, the quoting of the scriptures. And this is at the heart also of the postnatal or post-maternal Madonna whore symptom, because a man that grows to rape the innocent usually transform from raping the child to raping the child. And this is whereas a person that grew honoring the feminine, they are also honoring the feminine, they're honoring the inner child within the adult, and they're honoring the child naturally. So they don't have these also sexual issues when somebody, let's say, becomes a mother, and um, um, if the sexuality is around embodiment, nothing changes upon childbirth. If it is around corruption, childbirth brings something to the equation. Um, and a lot of, Uranus is life energy. And the square in Magha is basically also to do with those things. Mars hour, and Mars is ruling this Mercury that's opposing the squaring Jupiter. If the conception was under beliefs that birthing is punishment, then of course it has an additional components. Like I say, when something's based on rape, everything is. But when something, now again, even if children, let's say, I don't know, were born by rape, doesn't mean that the rest of their life they have to suffer. No, it means that the society, as the world society, we need to abolish these practices, and there are a lot of things supporting dematerializing these practices. And this awareness is also can assist to transmute. And by the way, tending to anything moldy in the house, in the teeth, in the hair, in the nails, with the solutions that are actually natural, is a good way to to support this process. Um, and again, with Lilith, we are reminded, Jupiter ruling over Lilith, that, and actually Mars trines Lilith, that the woman that would not be subjugated is the prerequisite um, to anything that aligns with the heart. And if one's heart cannot align with a woman that will not be subjugated, um, then what they love is an infant that they molest. And this is also when it comes to housing that is without rape, vocation that is without rape, and so on and so forth. That should be every housing and every vocation. Rape is not work. Rape is not housing. And when people, with Mars Aries, people pave the path to sense of self and sovereign housing, and that means that they put in the light all of these moldy structures, because it's their survival, it's their sense of self, and to try to paint the raped as the problem. Okay, but let's say if I broadcast and I talk about these things because I woke up by rape, then of course I talk about these things to remove the fungal structures, the fungal rapey structures from my life. And it pertains to, and I look at the chart and I say, okay, what are the things that pertaining to?